Hey everybody, so in this video I'm going to show you how to paint flowers using watercolor. So what I like to do when I'm painting flowers often is you want to work light to dark, right? So you don't want to get too dark too quickly. So what I've done is I've mixed up a light wash using Alizarin Crimson and Ultramarine and a tiny bit of umber. And, I'm just kind of going around and giving a little bit of value to the flower. Now, whenever you're using watercolor, you want to remember that the more diluted it is, the lighter the values are going to be, and the more concentrated the paint is, the darker it's going to be. And now I'm adding some sort of like orangey yellow color to the center. And what I'm doing is I'm just starting as the first layer. So I'm sort of like laying down these little dots, and now I'm going to add some brown ones. And you can do it like this where they're not touching, or you can let them blend together a little bit. Either is really fine. And here I'm doing the same thing, but in the bigger flower that's right next to it, using some ochre, which is right there on the paint pan. And notice there, with the flower before I was using the tip of the brush, and here I'm kind of using more the side. And you'll notice that the brush strokes are just a little bit different, right? So I'm also adding a little bit of yellow. And again, you can kind of have them next to each other, but they can kind of blend into each other a little bit. Either is fine. So the next thing I'm doing is I'm doing the same thing that I did at the beginning with that first flower, is I'm just adding a little bit of value just to kind of show the differences between the petals. And I have a little bit more brown in this one, so I'm kind of a little bit mixed about that. And we'll probably, later on kind of change that a little bit. And then in this last flower, I want it to be a little bit more yellow greenish. So I started with some yellow, and now I'm adding a little bit of green wash actually around the petals. So, whenever you want to show something, let's say you want it to stay pretty white, you want to think about going around into the negative space to show, that will help show the white of the flowers. The way that white works with watercolor is, generally speaking, what you want to do is use just the white of the paper. That can be kind of hard because it's very tempting to just kind of go over it with a wash and then you lose your whites. But unlike in other types of painting, like say oil paint or acrylic paint, you don't really have a great option with using paint. Like it comes with a white, and you see that in the tray. But I have found that it's just not as effective as just leaving the white of the page. So think about that. And sometimes people at the end will go back with like gouache. And that's another way that you can do things. But if you can, leave some white, and that will be helpful for you. So now I'm putting down my second wash. And with this, I have a slightly darker value than I did in the first wash, because again, I'm going from light to dark. And so I'm starting, I started with that lighter purple, and now I'm going a little bit deeper. So the way that I got that deeper purple is, again, Alizarin Crimson and some Ultramarine. You can tone it down with a little bit of umber, but just, be careful that it doesn't get too brown looking. I didn't like the brown at the beginning, so I'm trying as much as possible to kind of go over that a little bit. And you can kind of play around with different variations of the color that you're mixing. So let's say you're mixing up Alizarin Crimson and Ultramarine and umber, but you can play around with like different variations, like a little bit more blue or a little bit more alizarin, and notice the different effects that you get. It can also work really well to have it be a little bit darker towards the center of the flower, like you see right there, and then a little bit lighter further out. And then like sometimes when you darken up the tips of the flower, that can be kind of nice too. So just look at the flower that you're painting and notice where those shadows are. If you're working from a photograph, you should still have a good enough photograph that you have enough variation to work from. So I like to always have some kind of reference. I think it's important to either be working from life, ideally, if you can, or from a photograph. And so as you can see here, I'm just taking a lighter wash, and I'm just sort of very, very gently adding some paint to that area right there. Now I'm going to mix up a darker value, and I'm taking a little bit of Sap Green, umber, Ultramarine, and Alizarin Crimson, and a tiny bit of Viridian. And I'm going to go over that center of the flower to get a darker value. So again, it's really rare that people use black in watercolor. What you can do though is take some of your colors and mix dark values using your colors. So the darkest ones, of course, are your alizarin, your ultramarine, your umber. Those are good ones to draw from. And I wanted just to do that just to kind of like give a little bit more variation in that center of the flower. And I'm just adding a little bit of a darker wash around those two flowers just to make it a little bit more visually interesting. One of the nice things about watercolor is that it can be pretty playful, and a lot of times like you don't know exactly what you're gonna get because you have a kind of a sense of the colors and how they're gonna blend, but sometimes you're sort of surprised about one thing blends into another and maybe you get an effect that you like, and if you don't, you just wait for it to dry and then you can do another wash kind of over it to just maybe make it look a little bit more subtle if you do something that you're not happy with. Okay, so for this next wash around that third smaller flower, what I'm doing is I'm mixing up some of the lemon yellow and some of the sap green, and that makes kind of a light green type color. Not so emerald, it's more toned down than if you're using Viridian. So the sap green is good when you want that kind of like grassy sort of color. And then again, I'm just going back over it. And one nice thing about watercolor is that if you put paint down and you don't like the way it looks, you can just add a little bit of water to your brush and move the paint around and kind of make like a washy type effect. So now I'm just darkening up the center of the flower with a little bit of ochre. So again, whenever you're painting, it's really great to have some variation in your colors. So if you're painting with, say, yellow, you want to look at sort of what's around the color wheel. So maybe you're looking at some of the other variation colors near yellow. That'll make for a more interesting painting than just doing one color by itself. The last thing that I'm doing is I'm adding a little bit of the sap green with some of the yellow, and I'm gonna just go around those petals to make it a little bit more visually interesting because I felt like those petals are getting a little bit lost there. So that's, again, going back to the beginning, one thing that you can do is you can use a darker color but keep some of the whites, and that will make it look a little bit more interesting. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please hit the subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Leave a comment if you enjoyed the video. That really helps get it out to more people. You guys are the only marketing that I have, so I really appreciate you help sending this out to more people with comments. Thanks again. Bye.